Hello, everybody, and welcome to a two-part mini-series on the Butterfly Princess show, all about the Royal Shakespeare Company that's located in Stratford-upon-Avon. This is a two-part series where, firstly of all, I'm joined by Dean Astor, who is the senior medium relations manager at the RSC, and then in a future episode, I'm going to be joined by a lady called Jacinta, who's going to talk to us all about access provision at the RSC, so that it's accessible to all. So, hi, Dean, and firstly of all, really great to meet you, and thank you for doing this today. So, could you tell me, firstly of all, could you tell me a bit about your role as Senior Media Relations Officer?
I've been at the RSC for quite a while, over 25 years, and the department I work in, it's our responsibility to, what we say, tell the story of the RSC. In some simple ways, we liaise with media, newspapers, magazines, TV shows, and set up interviews. So I don't know, say you're watching Channel 4 News and there was a piece about Othello on it, which there was recently, then we would have been involved in setting that up. So we liaise between media and then a show, and we kind of publicize the work of the RSC.
And so, could you tell us a bit about the history of the RSC? Because, as we know, that Stratford-upon-Avon was the birthplace of the English playwright William Shakespeare.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Shakespeare was born and he died or was buried in Stratford. There's been theatre in the town for years, but the first kind of proper theatre was built in 1879. And there was a fire in 1926 and it kind of burnt, not completely to the ground, but it burnt down. So there was a competition to build a new theatre, and a female architect called Elizabeth Scott won that competition. And a new theatre was built and opened in 1932. And then we redeveloped that theatre in 2010. In the old theatre, people sat a long way away from the stage, and we wanted people to be able to be a lot nearer to the action. So, as I say, in 2010, we redeveloped the theatre. So we've got three theatres in Stratford, actually. We've got the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, which seats about 1,000 people. And then there's the Swan Theatre, which seats about 400. And then we've got a studio theatre, probably seats maybe 200, 250. It's a flexible space. That's called The Other Place. And it's, as I say, it's a studio theatre. So, and sometimes we have an outdoor theatre called the Garden Theatre. So I think there was an opportunity in this summer where you could have come to Stratford and possibly seen plays in 4 different kind of playhouses or spaces. So that's kind of the history of the RSC. I mean, what people think when they hear the words Royal Shakespeare Company is that we just put on work by Shakespeare. But that isn't true. Obviously, we do put on Shakespeare's plays. For example, at the moment, we've got a production of Othello on, and we've got Twelfth Night coming up and Hamlet coming up. Pericles is on in Chicago. But we also put on work by other famous playwrights, Arthur Miller, for example, and Shakespeare's contemporaries, Christopher Marlowe. Next year, we've got a production of Edward II. And also, we put on new work. So at the moment in our studio theatre, we've got a new play by a playwright called David Edgar. So we commission new plays. So a lot of people, as I say, think we just put on Shakespeare. And of course, you know, he's a big deal to us. But we put on plays by everybody. And I mean, some of the shows we have, people don't think are ours. So I'm sure most people will have heard of the musical Matilda, the musical. That's our show. It's our production. It started in Stratford. It's now in London for about the, I don't know, 14th year. It's been on Broadway. It's been on a world tour. It's going on another UK and Ireland tour next year. So we perform everywhere, perform in Stratford, London, around the UK, and overseas as well.
With you saying that, that we'll talk about the work that you do within the community shortly, but with you saying that you don't just perform, the Shakespearean classical plays, I know there are a lot of, well-known actors who like perform Shakespeare and have directed Shakespeare plays, like Judi Dench and Kenneth Branagh. Have they ever performed at the RSC?
Yes, a lot of people kind of sometimes they start their careers with us. Judi Dench performed with us in the 60s, came back and performed with us probably about 10, 15 years ago. Kenneth Branagh did a production of, well, numerous productions, but I remember seeing Hamlet, I think, in the early 90s. David Tennant performed with us before he got famous as Doctor Who and then came back and did a celebrated production of Hamlet, and then came back and did some other shows. Patrick Stewart, all sorts of people, really. Alex Hassel, who's in the new Disney Plus Rivals TV show, he's performed with us regularly. So sometimes people kind of start their careers with us, then they come back, or sometimes an established name will come and work with us later in their career. So yes, it's a mixture of kind of well-known names and new talent, I suppose. We want to work with as wide a range and as diverse a group of people, actors and creative people, designers, directors, as we possibly can.
So, obviously, I mentioned that you do a lot of work within the community as well. So you work with a lot of young people in schools and educational settings. What does that work involve?
Yes, I mean, we're a publicly funded organisation. The Arts Council fund us around £15 million a year. And with that comes a responsibility, I think. And we love this responsibility. We think that it's important that young people get a fantastic first experience of Shakespeare. So I think we work with, let me just check, yes, over 500,000 young people a year, over 1,000 schools. And we have this kind of network. So we work with partner theatres and in those around the country. And then in those areas, there are kind of clusters of schools. And the whole idea is to kind of spread best practice in teaching Shakespeare. We think Shakespeare is best experienced if you see it, come and see it. It wasn't designed to be read, it was designed to be performed. And we think the best way of teaching it is kind of on your feet as if you're in a rehearsal room. And we think you should start it quite young as well. And one of the ways we do this is we take a production around the country. We call it First Encounters with Shakespeare. And next year, for example, we're taking a production of The Tempest. And it goes into schools and theatres. And it's a shortened version of the play, but it's all Shakespeare's language. It's not translated in any way at all. And we find that this kind of, you need to see Shakespeare, and when people see it in their schools, I think they have more ownership of it as well. I mean, there are other, I mean, that department, they're called creative learning and engagement. They do so many different things. I mean, also there's a fantastic online resource on our website, a learning zone, which I think over 2.5 million people access a year. So you could be anybody in the world, and if you think, oh, I've got to write an essay about Romeo and Juliet, you can go to this website and find some, ideas and advice and about that play. So yes, they engage with, as I say, as many people, as many students as we can throughout the country.
That'd be real. Thank you for sharing that, game, because that'd be really useful. If you could possibly send me them links to
Yeah,
that site, I'd be happy to share that when this video is posted.
great.
And obviously, just to finish off now, could we talk about a bit about what's coming up, the new productions? Because I know that you're currently, well, you specifically are working on a brand new retelling of The Red Shoes. Now, this is a classic sort of fairy tale by the Danish author Hans Christian Andersen.
Yeah, that's right. Every year we have what we call a family show. I mean, we think our shows are, anybody can come and see our shows, but we do every year have a family show. Matilda the musical was our family show back in 2010 in Stratford, but this year it's Hans Christian Andersen's The Red Shoes in a new version. It's kind of a modern retelling by a playwright called Nancy Harris, and it's suitable for anybody over seven. I think what's interesting about it is a lot of people think fairy tales are all happy ever after, but actually, when you go back to the original source, sometimes there are things that feel quite dark. So we're looking at that. We're not kind of whitewashing it or sanitizing it. It's got all the kind of classic ingredients of fairy tale. There's like a prince, there's a ball, there's a talking mirror, all that kind of stuff. There'll be lots of music, obviously lots of dance. It's really about an orphan who is taken in by this couple who are kind of do-gooders. And for whatever reason, she goes into the forest, this girl, and is given a pair of red shoes, and it makes her dance, and she loves dancing. But it leads to a number of consequences, not all of which are necessarily good. But it's going to look sumptuous, I think. It's in the Swan Theatre. It's a kind of smaller auditorium, so it's going to be really intimate. And the kind of people that are working on it have worked with us before. The designer is a guy called Colin Richmond. He's a young guy. He's worked with us many, many times, and I've seen the designs, and it looks great. And it will be a great first introduction to kind of people, as I say, over seven to theatre. Because the storytelling is really clear, and I just think it's going to be an exciting experience, and also it will make people think, oh, I thought all fairy tales ended happily ever after, and in some ways this does, and maybe in some ways it doesn't. So it's also quite thought-provoking in that way.
Yes,
But
and sorry, and I really love the idea that you've sort of like your take with this production, because I've recently done a course about folk tales and fairy tales and explored the original origins. So it's really quite refreshing that you as a production company are sort of looking at the original origins of that story and making people realise that it's not just like, oh, happy endings. And I think that is a really refreshing way to look at things.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's say that the prince, who's very keen on the main character, who's called Karen, he's not so keen on her at the end, and you can experience and think why that is when you see the show.
Well, Dean, it's been really interesting to talk with you today, and thank you for, coming on and talking to us. And like I say, if any links you want to send to me, feel free to send them, and I will share them with my audience.
I'll do that. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you, Dean. It's been lovely also. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you. Bye. Bye bye.
bye.